Hello, everyone. So I wanted to get to the issue of Iran and our escalation with them, but I first wanted to just touch on some other issues. This just broke yesterday, I believe. Trump ordered Jeff Sessions to stop the witch hunt investigation, in quotes, and this would pretty much mean he's ordering Jeff Sessions to unrecuse himself, which would withdraw special counsel, which basically means Robert Mueller would be fired. And I believe that that's obstruction of justice, and it was obstruction of justice when Trump fired Comey. And I'm in no way a fan of James Comey, as I've said. Um, the thing that he ultimately did wrong, because I'm sure Republicans don't like James Comey either, but probably for different reasons. Probably because he didn't go after Hillary, and I guess I kind of have my issues with that, but I guess you could say I understand where he's coming from. Like you can't get a jury that's gonna not know about Hillary Clinton and all that, but I think it shows a systemic problem. It's not necessarily James Comey's fault. It's a systemic problem, we'll say. But ultimately, he said once before, I believe in his speech, I don't know where, but he, by his own advice, said don't interfere in an election within 60 days, and he did that by sending a letter to Congress saying that he was reopening the Hillary investigation. It was all just blown out of proportion when you look into the details of it. You know, this is my speculation, but my theory is James Comey did that kind of as a insurance policy. And Trump said like, yeah, he's all good now, James Comey. Basically, when that happened, so Trump ultimately thought he could confide in Comey, and that's why we have the memos from Comey that he did contemporaneously, and we know stuff that Trump said in private, basically. So I'm in no way, I'm not a fan of James Comey just because he's an establishment shill, in my view. He's got his book out, Higher Loyalty. So he's all about the military industrial complex. He's I'm sure he would more than happy to escalate more with Russia. And everyone that knows me knows that I have mixed feelings on the Russia investigation. Excuse me. But I know Trump is corrupt, and I think at the end of the day, the the question that I would have for Trump supporters is, with Trump doing stuff like this, it's not the first time that he dismisses the whole thing all the time, and now he's actually ordering Jeff Sessions to do something that would have a real impact. He's asking him to stop the investigation altogether. Um, how can you look at Trump? How does that not make him look guilty? I mean, it just is plain logic to me. I mean, if you're not guilty, then you're probably just gonna have to see your day in court and prove your case. That's what I think someone who is innocent would do. That they would be more than happy to go through the procedures and prove their case. And I know they say like, oh, there's a bias, so well, whatever. But I don't think these things are that substantiated. And the fact is that there is a lot of compromising information um, on people associated with Trump. I mean, the fact that Trump has businesses all over the world is a conflict of interest within itself. A federal judge, I don't know if it was one or two, but they just ruled recently that the emoluments case actually has merit, and that's in the Constitution. You can't be in a position as president where you're receiving gifts, and the fact that you have businesses in other countries. He registered 8 new businesses in Saudi Arabia on the year of the election. Um, and there's connections with Russia. His Trump's son said that they have money. That all their money is like Russian money. So I'm all for looking into corruption at the end of the day, and I think Trump trying to basically throw a hissy fit on Twitter and then order Sessions to do something that that would affect policy. It's dangerous territory. It's a authoritarian territory, and he also called the media the enemy of the people. Which, what I would say to that is just the truth is more nuanced than that. I mean, it's just too. Yeah, some people in the media probably are the enemy of the people. Sean Hannity, I would view as an enemy of the people. Um, but it's just not black and white like that. The mainstream media in general is not very good at their job. And there's a corporate mentality that has created this establishment bias, and that's why they don't talk about important issues that people care about as much. That's why I think you're seeing a rise in populism on both the right and the left. Trump was a faux populist. He spoke to the racist sentiments and the racist people in the country that they all kind of rallied behind that for sure, and that was in its way populism. I mean, it's not popular opinion of the whole country. About 25% of the country is basically a hardline Trump supporter. But he spoke to certain anti-establishment ideas that are populist. This whole drain the swamp thing. And he was talking about like not cutting Medicare and Social Security, but then like that's always been the GOP plan. So that's just a couple of examples. When they cover Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, this rising leader really in the Democratic Party now, she beat Joe Crowley in the primary in the Bronx, and it was a huge upset. And she's a Democratic socialist. So when they talk about her, they focus only on the horse race aspect of politics. So, in her case, like, oh, is democratic socialism going to be the future of the party? Is that going to match up electorally? And then sometimes they'll simply just lay out her policy proposals, but it's not. It's like to laugh and ridicule it. It's like it's. I think it's the establishment bias, like I said before. They just go like, oh, these things are really unreasonable. That's what Sean Hannity did. Except they don't actually give a rebuttal to why these things couldn't be done. They just mock it essentially. One good example that I'll bring up though was on The View, and I'm not a fan of The View. I can't stand watching it a lot of the time because they just talk over each other, and I can't process any thought that's being said half the time. But it was just great because Meghan McCain was on there, and she is really dumb. Like I've seen a few videos of her talking, and over time I've just come to realize, like, yeah, she really is not a serious thinker for one. I mean, as if I have to say that, but she just is not. Just has no analytical skill and is not objective. She's playing for a team just as much as anyone else in the Republican Party, and she tries to act like she's like above the fray, but it's just ridiculous. So she was trying to basically fearmonger about democratic socialism, and just was so funny because they laid out her platform just like I said. The one of the hosts there just laid out the platform, and Meghan McCain's like, well, first of all, why don't they pay more in taxes? That's ridiculous. They should pay like 90% in taxes. Um, First, I don't know if she said exactly that, like 90%, but like they should pay the amount that they think everyone should pay or whatever. Um, or maybe she did say 90%. I'm blanking on it, but regardless, it's beside the point. She's like, name a country where socialism has worked, and then Joy Behar, one of the other hosts there, was like, Denmark, Sweden, Finland, Iceland, like listing off the countries. Meghan McCain's still going off on her tangent in her like little like tirade, but I just wanted to bring that up because I thought it was funny. So now we have to get to some serious business with Iran. Things are getting to be very dangerous, I would say, and going in the direction of possibly war. And I think a lot of people in the military-industrial complex, the deep state, whatever you want to call it, but especially with this administration, I think a lot of them do want to see war with Iran. John Bolton has said, I think, many times, and what Mike Pompeo is doing seems to tell me that he's trying to escalate with them at the very least. I don't know if he's for a war, but I can obviously see he's trying to escalate with them. They're trying to essentially destabilize the country through sanctions, and it is working. Their currency is just collapsing right now in Iran, and so it's like they're squeezing Iran into a very dire situation where there's going to be probably a lot of riots and violence in Iran, and they're going to try and overthrow the government. And ultimately, I mean, yes, they're a theocracy, but there are reformers in the government, and things have, I would say, there was an argument to be made, like with the Iran deal, that the reformers were kind of taking more control, and Hussein Rouhani, trusted the U.S. Against the advice of the religious leaders there. I think there's like a name for them. I'm not exactly sure now, but basically, the far right religious leaders in Iran didn't want the Iran deal, as I'll get into in an independent article. But just to kind of set the stage a little bit more, like this goes against what Trump said about getting us involved in regime change wars. He lambasted the war in Iraq. He said it was like the worst mistake like in our history, I think. And on the campaign trail went after Hillary for being hawkish in regards to Russia, and I guess with Syria because like with the no-fly zone issue. But the message that he was essentially trying to convey was, let's think about America first, which I think can resonate with people even on the left. Just from the perspective of let's not be involved in wars all over the country, all over the world, and invest in our own country. And then Trump said he would meet with Iran without preconditions, contradicting what Mike Pompeo said. He actually laid out pretty specific things, and so that shows disorganization, I would say, in the administration. Which people want to talk about high turnover rate, like people coming and going out of the administration, leaving very quickly. I'm not necessarily sure that's a problem, because it's always a case-by-case basis. I think it depends on who's leaving, who's going to replace them. Are they going to be worse or maybe slightly better somehow? I don't know. So I think you really got to look at each individual there. But the important point here is that conservatives attacked Obama for saying the exact same thing. He said that he would meet with Iran without preconditions, and he got the nuclear deal. And what Trump's doing now is openly talking about trying to enter a nuclear deal with them, despite that he just exited the Iran deal. So they're talking about trying to do a whole new deal. So I'm going to read from the Independent first. This is an op-ed, I'm not going to read the whole thing. It's a little long though, and then I'll just try and give my take on it. The Trump administration announced its policy towards Iran on Monday after reneging on the country's nuclear deal with the international community. There are a dozen demands amounting in effect to a declaration of economic warfare, a demand for Tehran to surrender its defense and foreign policy, and the threat to force regime change. The conditions put forward by the new Secretary of State Mike Pompeo have no chance of being accepted by Iran. They have pleased Saudi Arabia, which has pledged to buy billions of dollars of weaponry from the U.S. and Israel, whose backers funded Donald Trump's election campaign. They have been met with dismay by America's Western allies, who see just how far the transatlantic divide has grown under Trump. In his first speech as Secretary of State, Pompeo declared that Iran must withdraw all its forces from Syria, stop supporting its allies, Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Houthis in Yemen. It must halt production of long-range missiles, stop uranium enrichment allowed under the nuclear agreement, and agreed to inspection of a range of facilities at any time, anywhere in the country. Let me just pause for a second. So stop supporting its allies, Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Houthis. So Hamas is bad. We don't have to, support them, obviously. And at the same time, the Israeli occupation is horrible, and that should be stopped. But yeah, don't condone Hamas. You don't have to condone necessarily any of those people on there. Hezbollah is bad too. However, they do fight ISIS. And the Houthis in Yemen, Saudi Arabia is conducting a genocide in Yemen. They're starving the country by doing a blockade, and they're bombing the country. They're bombing hospitals, and the Houthis are on the other side of that fight, fighting the Saudis. So that's a corrupt interest right there for us and Saudi Arabia, and we're, I mean, there's not necessarily punishments. Actually, we'll get into the punishments in the next paragraph, but it's not war, I would say, but this is a very risky game we're playing here, and I just think we're really going after Iran for no good reason. We're going after them because they're just perceived as an enemy, and that's the point I made before. How it's just a global chessboard for us, and there's people that are our allies, and there are people that are enemies. We're not necessarily, we're not innocent of things. Like we honestly do commit terrorism in many fashions, and Saudi Arabia certainly commits terrorism, and I would argue Israel does too. So this idea that like we're the arbiters of truth and we're on the side of good is not really born out of reality. And then agree to inspection of a range of facilities at any time, anywhere in the country. That's essentially the Iran nuclear deal when you're getting right down to it. That people talk about like, oh, like they had to announce or something. Well, it's been verified. It's been verified by the IAEA 11 different times that Iran was going through what was in accordance with the deal. That's what they verified. So I don't know what people are saying. Like there's reason to believe that they're not telling the truth. I listen to the facts on the ground, So let's continue here. These are the very basic requirements, said Pompeo, implying other demands will follow. Failure by Tehran to comply, he threatened, will result in the strongest sanctions in history, which would wound. I'm sorry, that must be a typo. Which would crush Iran's government if it does not change its ways. Iran's people, he said, need to get rid of their leaders. And let me just pause for a second here. There's a video of Mike Pompeo. He compared Iran's government to the mafia. Whatever, fine. I mean, you could probably say the same thing about this government too. But put that aside. He's saying there's corruption in Iran, and people in Iran want their health care and they want their rights. What? The people in this country need health care. There's thousands of people that die every year because they don't have access to health care, and millions who don't have access. You're talking about these things in order to justify a conflict, broadening a conflict with another country. So it just defies all logic. Like, you're talking about trying to get you're talking about these things as universal rights when it comes to Iranians, but not your own people. It makes no sense. So here we go. There is, of course, always the possibility with the U.S. administration that the threats will not materialize. It has just pulled out, for the time being, at least, from a trade war with China. After all the tweets of annihilating North Korea, Trump is meeting with Kim Jong-un without any preconditions. It could be that Pompeo's rhetoric could be seen as part of a contest between him and new National Security Advisor John Bolton on hawkishness. The White House could theoretically distance itself from Pompeo as it did from John Bolton's demand that Kim Jong-un accept the Libyan option for nuclear disarmament, the one under which Muammar Gaddafi gave up his nuclear program only to be overthrown a few years later by NATO and U.S. bombing, hunted down and lynched. But on Iran, Pompeo was keen to pander to Trump's destructive urges, unlike Rex Tillerson, who was fired for trying to restrain them. There are real dangers in the bellicose American approach. The JCPOA, Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, or Iran Agreement, was viewed by its signatories, Britain, France, Germany, Russia, and China, and until Trump, the U.S., as Plan A to stop proliferation. No one thinks the U.S. administration's Plan B is going to work. Trita Parsi of the National American Iranian Council said Plan B of the Trump administration is designed to fail and then pave the way for Plan C, which is most likely war. When you combine unrealistic demands with massive pressure, then you are by design creating a pathway to confrontation. So I could probably go on, but it lays out, we're trying to sanction the hell out of the country, and listing all these demands that we know are not going to be met. And we know that people in the administration are very hawkish. So I'm led to believe that I think that this is by design to destabilize Iran. Like if we're not going to just march to war with Iran, essentially, we're going to destabilize Iran so much that there's going to be violence in the streets, try and take over the government, like an overthrow of the government. And by the way, what happens when the Iranian government is overthrown? Bad people as they are, whatever, the government's gone now. What fills that vacuum? What has the most power in the region? Do you think it's going to be like a secular thing, people that are moderate, or do you think it's going to be terrorists, far right people? And like I said before, Hassan Rouhani is a reformer, I should say, and pushed for the Iran deal against what the far right religious people, the religious leaders in Iran were saying. And then when Trump pulled out, they're laughing at the reformers and saying like, "Yep, you shouldn't have trusted the U.S." So this mixed with a lot of other things that Trump is doing and the administration is doing is ruining the word and potential for diplomacy from us, all across the world. And we're seeing the results of that here, with the U.S. just, essentially escalating with everything that they have, depending on the situation. With North Korea, I think there's nothing that's been agreed to with North Korea. First of all, they say that there's reports that they're still running nuclear tests. Whatever. I'm not trying to, use that to say we should punish them or whatever. I hope that that we can find some kind of peaceful solution with that. It's a harder situation with North Korea, I think, but I think if there is a potential for peace under the Trump administration, I wouldn't dismiss that. I would just say be hesitant. We have to be hesitant and make sure that it's not that we're not deluding ourselves, and that's not false hope. But with Iran, it's antagonizing them for really no good reason, as I've said, because we're allies with Saudi Arabia, we're allies with Israel, and they commit atrocities. We're committing atrocities. We're bombing 8 different countries, and we're going to try and tell Iran what to do. I don't think the American people buy into this kind of stuff. They don't think to themselves like, yeah, we should be going after Iran. This is the impression that you get in Washington and that you get in the mainstream media. So I think people are more or less non-interventionists. So they only care about defending the country against imminent threat. Excuse me. So Iran is not something that crosses people's mind from day to day. I think what the Democrats should do is grow some chops on foreign policy and economics, and tell the people how it is. Because, like I say, like people are not going to know the finer details of all these things. So tell them the truth, and there wasn't enough outrage when when Trump exited the Iran deal. The Democrats hardly said anything. So they need to actually step up their game, and not just fearmonger on Russia all the time. They have to actually have a vision. And I've said that before, but when it comes to Iran, yeah, they have to actually show outrage over issues that matter to people, and that includes economics as well.